Bread is simple. Bread is down to earth. Bread is just there. It's there for you. So bread, however, is cheap and it's always available. Bread is for everyone, for rich and poor, for men and women, for kings and beggars, everyone. Bread has no status. It reminds us that we are all humans. We're all the same. Jesus shared a meal with people and some saw this as a problem because he had the wrong kind of guests, the wrong kind of people he ate meal with. But eating is an act of fellowship. And fellowship or companion, the word has Latin roots and it comes from bread. It means bread together. So if you have a companion, you have someone to bread together. So why all this fuss about bread though? So why? Why is bread so vital and so important? And Jesus knows that God's words are our bread. So eating bread will make you feel hungry eventually. Maybe the next day, maybe earlier. Eating bread of life brings everlasting life by believing as you receive and as you partake in God's mercy and grace. Eating bread will strengthen your body with the nutrients you take to yourself. But eating bread of life strengthens your spiritual body by believing and receiving His word, that He gives us a hope and a new outlook in life. Today, we're talking about sustenance. I don't know, I like this word, so I chose it. There are probably easier words for that. But I kind of got inspired to do that. I thought about this topic for a while now, but never had the material or the right ingredients for that topic to build it together. But last week, a few of us went for a walk after church in the park. And then we walked in the sunshine, it was really nice, almost forgot it was winter. And then some 3 women talked about food, I heard, for the whole 5 kilometers. And they had only this one topic on their mind the whole time. They talked so much about it and hyped each other up until in the end it was craving for food and craving for this specific restaurants. And we went there and it was delicious. I'm not mad at all. It's really good that they talked about food. And food is so often on our minds. We have to think about it for most people multiple times a day, at least 3 times for me. Some people more often, some people less. It's at the center of the daily planning. Our breaks are structured around food, right? Breakfast, lunch, dinner. And in some cultures, even asking if you're doing all right is asking if you have already eaten. I asked Fred and he confirmed that. Sometimes this happens, you ask, have you already eaten? Kind of are you fine? Yeah, and sometimes our relationship with food is complicated. We celebrate it, we brag about how much we could eat when we were younger. Sometimes we feel guilty or ashamed when we ate too much. Our mood can change and be influenced by food. We can get hangry. I've experienced that personally. I know how this feels like. So it's no wonder that the Bible also says a lot about food. Meals, about feasts, about fast, about all this reflection of the life of ordinary people. And so there are many stories related to food. Where food is shared, maybe it's shared with, those stories were shared over a meal originally. And the Bible begins and ends with meals. From the first encounter, the first words of God to humans to invite them to eat from every tree in the garden, starts the first conflict over the forbidden fruit. Then it goes all the way, the last act of Jesus before his death, there was a feast. He was sharing in this Passover feast, full of meaning with his disciples. Finally, in the end, is the vision of the wedding feast of the Lamb, how it's called in the new word, a massive joyful banquet. So it's many different settings and types of meals are described in the Bible. And among those countless stories and metaphors and proverbs and faithful encounters over the meals, one figure stands out. Is being more associated with food than any other. It's the central character, Jesus. His first temptation in the desert was about food. His first public appearance was at a wedding feast. There was a catering crisis and they asked him to help. His last meal before the crucifixion, as we said, is what he has left us to do in memory of him, and we still remember this today. He was a guest and a host to many dinners. He was even accused by the religious elite to be a glutton and wine drinker and friend of sinners, outcasts, and the lowest of society. And so many of his teachings and stories, they involve food or feasts beside finances and wealth, as we have learned last week. Like many stories concern those topics. And so food or eating together for whatever occasion shows the full range of the human experience. We can experience a joyous wedding banquet and sharing a meal with friends. We can have sometimes conflicts at the dinner table. We have we experience hope when someone is recovering from an illness and takes the first bite or the first spoon of soup again. We can experience loneliness, eating alone maybe, sorrow, fullness, regret, betrayal, and so many other emotions. And many of Jesus' teachings happened when he was guest at a dinner party or the host, when he provided lots of wine, fish, and bread out of little, or when he made a breakfast or broke bread. So this is when he showed what community is like, how he makes the good news of who he is and what he has done for us visible and tastable to us. So today I want to kind of like eat our way a bit through the Bible, if I can say that. We're going to first look at some important meals that changed the course of history, and then I want to show the most important food and how often we should eat it. So the first life-changing meal, Bible is full of it, and it starts right off at the very beginning with Adam and Eve. It's the first recorded meal, and that changed the consequence of their and our lives today as well. Fruit was just a trigger for something much bigger and sinister. We read in Genesis 2:16, "The Lord commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat it, you shall surely die." You'll notice I just put eat and meal and other food-related words. I just marked them because I just want to kind of like see how much importance this has to us. So there was a teaching and a lesson involved. God gave them the option to make decisions for themselves. We know the story, to let them exercise their free will and allow them to decide against what he said to make their choice. Unfortunately, they made the decision, as it says later, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." Consider this, how different would our world be if this unspecified but deliciously looking and probably tasting fruit would not have found its way into their mouths. It would have changed everything, I think. However, even after they made their choice, even though they faced some consequences immediately, like being ashamed and naked, getting exiled from the garden, and some later, they did in fact die. God did not give up on them, but he gave them the first promise of a Savior that would restore the world to humans and the relationship to the Creator, the way God intended it. And there's so much more to it that we cannot cover today. But one thing stood out to me. God cared about the food even now, and in Genesis 3:18 instructed them. Along with the consequences of the actions, he said, "Eat the herb of the field, in the sweat of your face you shall eat bread." It's like God cares so much about our food, he puts it like in the first promise of the Bible. And it's the first time bread is also mentioned. We'll come back to this later. And it shows just how much significance this everyday act of eating can have. So let's jump forward a long, long time later. The Bible tells us about the second life-changing meal that I picked out, selected for today. It's about Jacob and Esau. This is how ChatGPT thinks they looked like. We know the story, the two brothers, twins who over a meal of lentil soup and some game changed the course of life completely and became sworn enemies for decades. It started when the younger one, Jacob, tried to get hold of something that he was not to have yet. He tried to take matters into his own hands and not wait for God to make it happen. And we see a fascinating reason also, like while reading this one, why the father loved the eldest more, because he ate of his game. And it's kind of like, yeah, this food must be so good, you prefer one son over the other. I never saw how much of an influence food had in this story, but yeah, it seems it's evident here. And we just read a couple of verses from this story, Genesis 25:29, if you want to follow along. Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore his name was called Edom. And I think many of us probably can relate how it feels like in a situation after a long day of work, or you come home from the gym or a workout, you just need to feed ourselves. It's the only thing that matters right now. You just need to do it. And Jacob said, "Well, sell me your birthright as of this day." And Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die, so why do I care about this birthright? This drama, the boy's really hungry." And then Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils, and he ate and drank, arose and went his way. So Esau despised his birthright. There's so much more again to this story about the birthright and blessing, but this simple transaction over this lentil dal had massive consequences. And later, we read in the story, to actually get hold of this birthright from his aging father, Jacob tricks him with preparing a savory goat meal and bread, as his father loves, with the help of his mother. Meanwhile, his brother Esau is out hunting some antelopes and preparing a barbecue for his father. Jacob uses some disguise with the goat skin, and the old man is tricked over a delicious meal to give his blessings to the other boy. So Esau is furious when he returns back. He sees the blessing ceremony is already over. And he didn't receive it, so he swore to kill him. And Jacob had to flee and left the country and was away for 20 years, never saw his mother again because she died in the meantime. He got tricked himself by his uncle multiple times, had 12 sons from 4 different wives. It's like his life was a chaos. He gave him much grief later in life and had a sorrowful, painful life, even though he eventually reconciled with his brother. Imagine again how different this encounter, the story of his life would have been if these two fateful meals, the one with the lentil one and the one where he tricked his father, wouldn't have happened, if he would have just enjoyed the meal as it's supposed to be and waited for God to fulfill what he has promised, instead of marching forward and ahead of what he was supposed to do at the day. Fast forward again, many hundreds of years later in the story of David and Abigail. So David later became the second king of Israel. He's still a fugitive at the time, fleeing from his father-in-law and current King Saul. And a very rich man lived in this area, had an estate and thousands of sheep and goats and so on, and it was sheep sharing season. So I'm not a shepherd, I have no idea what happens exactly there, but I guess in the time, what I read, it was a joyous time of a spring festival to celebrate the success and the abundance of what God has given his people. So it was a proper feast. Let's say this billionaire with all his shepherds have become personal friends with David, and the man of David helped them in the night and protected them against robbers and so on, from wild men and animals. So they saw nothing wrong in sharing food with these new acquaintances that they've made friends with. And David's men never charged a penny for it. So it's no wonder that David sent some of the men to this rich guy with a friendly message. And it's recorded in 1 Samuel 25, 4-6. So when David hears in the wilderness that Nabal was sharing his sheep, he sends 10 young men and says, "Go up to Carmel, go to Nabal, greet him in my name. And thus you shall say to him, peace be to you, peace be to your house, and peace to all that you have. Now I have heard that you have sharers. Your shepherds were with us, and we did not hurt them, nor was there anything missing from them all the while they were in Carmel. Ask a young man, and they will tell you. Let your young man find favor in your eyes, and we come on a feast day. Please give whatever comes to your hand to your servants and to your son David." I find it a really friendly and respectful message, kind of like, hey, let us be also part of the celebration of your abundance. But not so Nabal. His name, this billionaire's name, literally translated means fool, and he lives up to his name because he's described as harsh and evil. He sends them away. He has absolutely no interest at all to share anything with David or his men. He even complains that he has to share the bread and so on, and then he rejects and sends them away. In the meantime, he holds a feast like a king. He drinks himself completely drunk. His wife, though, she's described as intelligent, as beautiful, heard from the servants how her husband treated those men who were of so much use to them, and quickly and wisely she puts together a meal, an opulent gift to send to David. He's already on the way with 400 of his 600 men and he's sworn to attack Nabal's estate and kill all men that he could find. So then Abigail made haste and took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 sheep already dressed, 5 seah, apparently that's 27 kilos, of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs, and loaded them on donkeys. So this generous gift she packed without the knowledge of her husband, and this gift was very well received by David, who stopped any revenge and realized a smart woman kept him from spilling blood. Nabal, upon hearing what this generous thing that his wife did after he became sober again, had a heart attack and died 10 days later. So while David married Abigail, and no one of the servants got killed. So this one simple gesture of sharing food during a feast could have had a totally different outcome if Nabal would haven't been so selfish. Yes, it would have cost him something, of course, but in the end it cost him his life. And by sending this peace offering, Abigail prevented another killing of many people, and her and David's lives changed completely. So feasts back in the time were a joyous occasion. There are multiple instances where the Israelites were called to have feasts and celebrate what God has given them. And they were meant to extend grace to others, to invite people and share the blessings. God's blessings, God's forgiveness, abundance, and love. Fasting is associated with a time of sorrow, guilt, and atonement, and you cannot have a feast. It just doesn't feel right while you're fasting, while you're in exile, while you're repenting, while you're turning back to God. But once this is done, you come back and you can enjoy God's presence. And we see that in Isaiah 25:6, salvation is pictured as a feast in the presence of the Lord. And in this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all people a feast of choice pieces, a feast of wines on the lees, of fat things full of marrow, of well-refined wines on the lees. So some spiritual thinkers and leaders think the end goal in life is the dissolution of self and personality, and just like don't have any desire. But ancient Israel, it dreams of rich food, big crowds, and even the promise that God gives them in Exodus is to bring them into a land of milk and honey, not a land of denial and fasting camps. It's like this is where everything comes together and it's really good. So they look forward to that. So rejecting someone from a feast like Nabal did is not just denying the favor that God has given them all. And I don't think that's really a call that any human should make. So we jump forward a few centuries again and stop on a Thursday night, the last even before Jesus was crucified. Many important and profound things have been spoken about at this dinner that changed the history really of the whole world. It was time for the Passover meal. It was a somber remembrance of how God delivered them many years ago from slavery. And this is a modern way of how this could have looked like. We know this TV series. So during this meal, Judas was signified by a dipped bread, piece of bread given by Jesus that he would betray him and set the events in motion that would lead to Jesus' crucifixion. During the same meal, Jesus predicts that one of his closest friends would deny him multiple times. There's also a time where the disciples argued who is the greatest and who has the highest position in the new kingdom. But it's also a time where Jesus prayed for them. He prayed for them, he encouraged them, and he instituted what we know today is the Lord's Supper. And we know this story because we have done this many times in communion. Just a quick recap. He said to them, "With fervent desire, I have desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer." So Jesus really wants to have this meal with them. It's his fervent desire. It's like, sometimes you look forward to a catch up with a friend or a dinner or something else, and we really want to go there, and it feels so sad when someone cancels and we cannot go. So Jesus really is looking forward to it. "For I say to you, I will no longer eat of it until it's fulfilled in the kingdom of God." And he took the cup, gave thanks, and said, "Take this and divide it among themselves. For I say to you, I will not drink of the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes." And he took bread, gave thanks, and broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." So he made this meal that already had so many different encounters and was so meaningful, even more meaningful for us today, by giving us a direct link to what he did for us. The sacrifice, and we honor this request by doing communion, where we remember what he did for us. The bread, the wine, as a symbol for the body and blood that was broken and spilled for us. A few days later, at the breakfast at the sea, my favorite chapter in John 21, that, Jesus hosts a meal. This time it's a simple breakfast of fish and bread on a coal fire, and it sets the scene for rehabilitation of Simon Peter as the leader of the new church. Jesus could have chosen to take him on a long walk, so why did he have a breakfast ready? I think it shows that Jesus cares for us, no matter our circumstances or where we are. In life, he cares about emotionally, spiritually. If we are having a good or bad day, he's there for us. And often we know what we did wrong, like probably Peter knew that after he betrayed him. And we're our own biggest accusers, sometimes even enemy. And we need the grace and the gentle correction from God. Sometimes we first need some food to be ready to receive other instructions from God, to talk about the heavier topics. So this breakfast definitely changed the course of Peter's life. He was restored as the leader of the new Christian movement, of the Christian church, and he was equipped with leading them. And his life was changed during a meal, and this change spread through the word. So these examples are just like a small selection of the important role that food and meals played in the Bible of the biblical characters, humans like you and I. And there's so much more to uncover once you start. So, I don't know, there's like, when I did this, so many more examples came to mind. However, there is one particular food that stands out throughout all of the meals, mentioned in the Bible. Can you guess which one it is? I mentioned it a few times. Yes. It is bread. The good old carbs. If you're similar to a friend of mine whose name rhymes with bread, he eats 360 out of 365 days a year, he eats rice. So your bread is probably rice then, but in biblical times it's bread. It stands for standard food. It's meal, it's provision, it's loaves, it's what you eat every day. It's mentioned 361 times in 330 verses in the Bible and 297 times alone in the Old Testament. So these past years, some people started making bread and spent more time having their own sourdough starters and so on. I'm not a bread baker, but my wife is, so she made delicious bread. And sometimes I come home and I'm still welcomed sometimes by the sweet aroma of either banana bread or focaccia or some other types of really good baked stuff. And I feel instantly better when I smell those carbs and feel hungry. And growing up in Austria and Germany, this is my biggest complaint about Australia, the lack of proper, affordable, good, hard, dark, whole grain bread. Like really bread in this core sense. Not a day goes by where I don't eat bread, and I'm sure many Central and Eastern European friends think the same. Anyway, bread equals food. And there are even in German especially certain times of break during the day that we associate directly with bread. This one means bread time. This is basically a break to eat bread. This one means Abendbrot, which is evening bread. It's what you eat in the evening. You eat your evening bread. And if you cannot earn enough money with your job, it's called breadless art, brotlose Kunst. It's everywhere. If you have a profession where you can pay your bills, you have a Brotberuf, a bread profession, or your bread and butter. So this word is ingrained in our language, and I'm sure in English as well, in many other occasions. Why is that? Bread is simple. Bread only consists of a few ingredients: yeast, water, flour, and salt. And it's storable, and those ingredients, and they can endure a long, long time. Other food may perish or be maybe unavailable at some time, like when the mango season is over. I always feel sad because I have to wait another year, I guess, for the delicious and cheap mangoes, or when the winter tomato shortage kicks in and the tomatoes go up in price. But the ingredients for bread remain. It's like mostly stable. Bread requires presence. You cannot do bread in a hurry. You cannot rush it. It doesn't care if you rush it. You need it to, it involves time, rest, kneading, baking time. It's the opposite of a fast-paced life. In biblical times, preparing and making bread would often consume like the whole day. And so the family would come together at dinner ready to eat. And they would have bread that might look like this flatbread, this Turkish one, I think it is. And it was the plate to put vegetables and lentils on. You would tear pieces off and dip them in a dip. You would use the crust as a spoon and maybe even the soft dough as a napkin for the lentils that were left in your beard. So bread was your plate, was your meal, was your spoon, was your napkin. Bread is down to earth. Literally, it consists of grains growing from the earth. But also, when you think of meat, that's associated with opulent feasting and like, oh, so good. But it also comes with a bunch of hygienic and maybe aesthetic and maybe ethical challenges. Like meat is controversial in many occasions, while bread has none of that. Bread is just there. It's there for you. Meat is for a time of feasting. It's costly to buy, difficult to store, and so it's, if you don't have refrigerators, best to use immediately and with a large crowd, so nothing is left. People today still do it. They have some animal and they eat it, the whole village eats it. So bread, however, is cheap and it's always available, and it's always there for you, and it's there in your daily life, in your household, and it's enough. Bread is for everyone, so that's no dietary advice though, but for rich and poor, for men and women, for kings and beggars, everyone. Bread has no status. Bread is kind of like, it reminds us we are all humans, we're all the same. It's not consumed to show how different we are, but it's meant to be shared, and portions to be broken off, like from this large loaf at the center of the table. And it's no wonder that breaking bread together is a symbol of community. It's a symbol of unity, and it's not something Jesus made up, because this was already the custom at the time. He just used the picture for them to drive the point home. And Jesus shared a meal with people, and some saw this as a problem because he had the wrong kind of guests, the wrong kind of people he ate meal with. But eating is an act of fellowship. And fellowship, or companion, the word has Latin roots, and it comes from bread. It means bread together. So if you have a companion, you have someone to bread together. And so this is what Jesus is doing with sinners, and it became a problem for some of them. Bread is also a symbol for hospitality and peace. And remember Abigail, who brought 200 loaves of bread to David and his men? She wanted to show them that they were indeed welcome and appreciated. No one gives bread to the enemy, right? Bread saves the day, as it also saved the day when Elijah was at the brook and ravens brought him bread, or when Jesus fed the 5,000 and 4,000 men with a few bread rolls and fish. Bread is also daily. It's daily on the table, but it also needs to be made fresh on the day. It needs to be eaten on the same day, because it goes stale. You can put it in the freezer, but not in 1000 BC. Maybe today, we can do this in the last 100 years. So who prefers bread who is like 1 day old over the fresh bread that's just cooled down, came from the oven? And grain, which is one of the main ingredients of bread, can be stored almost indefinitely. Like, remember the story of Joseph when he stored the grain for many years, for the 7 good years and 7 bad years? So I think it must have lasted, like this first grain that came in, maybe 14 years plus until the first harvest came in. And so grain is very important for civilization, and in the Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent, to build cities, to build civilizations. But then, after grain has been stored for a while, it needs to be taken, it needs to be crushed, and then it needs to be made into flour, mixed with yeast and water and salt, and then made into bread. And this needs to be consumed today. So why all this fuss about bread, though? So why? Why is bread so vital and so important? Because you didn't come here today to hear about bread and its praise and its many meanings. Even though I could go on and on. You came here for spiritual food. As Jesus himself said in Luke 12:23, life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. So these life-changing meals that we looked at earlier, they could have been feasts or fasts, but most of the time it's ordinary meals. It's ordinary food. It's your daily bread. What you eat every day shapes your life more than what you eat once a year, once a month, or even once a week. So many meals in the Bible, and maybe in your life too, they have been life-changing. It might have been a dinner with a new business opportunity, or a farewell dinner for a friend, or a banquet at your wedding day. And these are really extraordinary events that can have effects many, many years into the future. But nothing is as life-changing as your daily bread. Nothing is as life-changing as your daily bread. If you exercise, you know this from training, right? You cannot just show up and run a marathon and expect good results. You need to do regular training. You need to put in the effort. You cannot just throw out a hard gym session and do some PRs and expect really amazing results. Probably you'll hurt yourself. You need to train up to that. You need to be consistent day by day. You cannot just do this once a month. Some of us are learning new languages, and I know this because I use an app with a passive-aggressive green owl that reminds me to do the lessons. And it's not the same, as, of course, as talking to actually to people, but it's this little effort, day by day, that builds the foundation, step by step. And it's this consistency, layer after layer, that slowly builds over time. So no other character in the Bible is associated with, as I mentioned, as often with food and with bread as the central one, Jesus. He was born in Bethlehem, which means house of bread. And he prays for us to have our daily bread. He multiplied bread, he denied the temptation to make bread for himself. He told stories about bread and sourdough and yeast, broke bread and declared it's his broken body. And he says about himself, I should have shown this one, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall never hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. So then the audience complains why he made this bold statement, and he says also there he came from heaven and was therefore God. But then he doubled down, and in verse 48 to 51 he says, I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna, some kind of bread in that way, in the wilderness and are dead. This is the bread which comes down from heaven, that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I shall give is my flesh, which I shall give for the life of the world. So you might think, Jesus, why would you say that? It's so like radical, kind of like, why would you make this bold claim? Because it's the truth. Jesus is a master in packaging spiritual truths into everyday metaphors, and he makes statements that make the listeners think. What could he have meant, and why would he have said that? Gives them food for thought that they have to ponder about and cannot just like, oh yeah, of course, I understand this. So it needs time. And bread was everything in their life, but Jesus tells them, I am your everything. I am your daily sustenance. I am your everlasting salvation. And Jesus knows that God's words are our bread. He quotes this when he's hungry and tempted to use his godly powers to provide for himself, to do his own will in Matthew 4:4. It's the text we read. But he answered and said, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So eating bread will make you feel hungry eventually. Maybe the next day, maybe earlier. Eating bread of life brings everlasting life by believing as you receive and as you partake in God's mercy and grace. Eating bread will strengthen your body with the nutrients you take to yourself. But eating bread of life strengthens your spiritual body by believing and receiving his word, that he gives us a hope and a new outlook in life. And this bread of life is also meant to be eaten daily, by breaking it with others, by sharing it in the presence of others, by taking the time to chew it, to digest it, by telling others how great that bread is. Because there is nothing in life as life-changing as the bread of life. So I'm guilty myself, more often than I'd like to admit, that I sometimes neglect this daily spiritual bread. Of course I make sure to eat my bread daily, like my usual diet of carbs, but often I hurry or rush to work, or I don't find the time, or I get distracted by other things, when what I really need is this uninterrupted time in the presence of the bread of life. Time in God's word, in his presence. Time to slow down, time to break off a piece, time to chew it, time to taste it, digest it, sometimes take a bigger or smaller piece. Sometimes I have not chewed it properly and it upsets my stomach. Sometimes I prefer the easier fast food spiritual snacks that are lighter to digest. Maybe someone has a devotional reading for me and someday, but I feel it's not enough. I feel it's like it's not the same. It doesn't fulfill me the same way as if I would have taken the time for the real bread. If I just eat some porridge. And so this past few months, my mind was occupied a lot. In the past, about the past, the present, and the future, what I can control and what I cannot control, plans to do and what not to do, things that I control and I cannot control. And I shared this with some of you already, focusing on what I can do in my job, career, finances, future situation. And all the time, God is actually inviting me to a shared meal in his presence. To take the time to break this bread, to be in his presence. To let him be the bread of life, the sustenance of what I need, so that he can build me up again. That's what I was missing, and also why I couldn't hear his voice amongst all the other noise, because I didn't take the time for this daily bread. So maybe you had a life-changing meal, like some of the characters we heard about today, a life-changing encounter with God, where you were amazed and praised God, and wow, so good. And it's awesome if this happens. Maybe you are or you were in a fast, in a time of sorrow, where you encountered God in this time. And God is there in times of joy and in times of sorrow and in trouble. But He's also present in our everyday lives. Sometimes life with Him is not made out of crazy cycles of feast and fasts. Sometimes we don't have dramatic church services or in extraordinary prayer times and like everything makes sense. But in this daily commute, in waking, in sleeping, in working, in resting, in everyday life, even if you don't understand what you read now or if your prayers don't make sense to you, this is where we continue to grow by consistently taking the time for Him and let Him be the sustenance. If I always wait for a life-changing meal until I eat something, then I will soon starve. So I need this daily providence from God. If I only exchange good mornings or good nights and hellos and the grocery list with my wife and didn't take time to get to see her point of view or to give her undivided attention when talking and spending time, then she probably wouldn't be my wife much longer and we would become acquaintances and strangers over time. Has your work or your career been maybe the main dish for a while? Or your family? Or your relationships? Finances? Worries? Can I suggest to have Jesus as your everything, like the ancient people used bread, as the plate, as the meal, as the spoon, as the napkin. So I can describe all day long how great this or that kind of bread tastes, for example. I can use the most eloquent vocabulary, show you the nutrients and how it's made, and persuade you to try this bread, how good it is for you, let it smell you. But if you never take a bite and eat it, you'll never experience it. Maybe you think I made this all up. So there's only one way to find out, right? Eat it. Eat this daily bread of life and tell me how it tastes.